Welcome here to a brand new episode on the Frame Solution podcast. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, good to have you back. In this episode, I'm going to share with you 5 lessons I learned from my PhD. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Number 1, your supervisor will make or break your PhD. It's very important when you're choosing a PhD to think about your supervisor team. If you're lucky enough, make sure you do thorough research to discover their working styles, their previous PhD students they've supervised, their turnaround time, how the PhD students have gone through their research groups, what are they up to, and always know there's no smoke without fire. If you find anything that is make sure you dig deep and find the reason as to why that thing exists. Because if you get yourself a PhD supervisor that you don't know their working style, you might find yourself conflicting when it comes to working. You might find yourself stressed. You might find yourself micromanaged. You might find yourself not having a good PhD experience. So make sure you study your PhD supervisors and discover their working styles and how many students they've supervised in the past. Number 2, your PhD is your PhD. This you might be sure of it, but you have to make sure you sit in the driver's seat of your PhD. Many times when you let your PhD just go as your PhD, you leave it in the hands of your supervisor, you're not going to develop as a PhD student. That happens so many times, especially if you're an international student who is getting into a new culture, a new country to study your PhD. You might not know how a different country operates in terms of how PhDs are run in that country and in that university. So, coming from an African country, most times we treat our elders with so much respect that we let them decide each and everything because it's the elder. That was something that I did at the start of my PhD, and I really had to pay for it in the sense that my PhD wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. But if you decide to take charge of your PhD from its start, you will definitely avoid these problems of having a failed PhD, of not having belief in yourself, because you'll be in charge of your PhD. So remember that it's your PhD at the end of the day. So sit in the driver's seat and make sure you are the one steering the PhD in the direction that you want it to go. Number 3, when you're doing a PhD, do not create a bubble around your PhD. I know, I've been there. I created myself a bubble when I was doing my PhD. I knew it was my PhD. I could not discuss it with someone else who is not in the same field because I'm thinking, okay, I'm the specialist, I'm the virologist. I know everything that comes to virology. So how can I discuss my PhD with someone who is doing chemical engineering? Don't do that. Create yourself people around you who are doing PhDs, and also network with other people in other research groups. If you go for conferences, any seminars, make sure you talk to people who are doing different research from you. That way, you can get a different perspective from them when they're doing their PhD. You can even pick some lessons that you might implement in your PhD, even if they might not be directly linked to your PhD, but another perspective might help you navigate a problem you're facing in your PhD. So do not create a bubble around your PhD. Burst that bubble and go out and network with different people. That will also help you when you're done with a PhD, because you need to have a network to get jobs that you want to get. And if you're only concentrating at being with only the people you're doing with your PhD, your research group, your university, this network is not going to be developed. So network as much as possible and be open to sharing your PhD progress with other people. You never know what you'll get out of those sharings that you do. Number 4, make sure you have a hobby outside your PhD. I've seen many students, I used to be one of them, who do their PhD 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days a week. That can take a toll on your mental health. A PhD is anything else at the end of the day. When I finished my PhD, I understood that my PhD was just like any other qualification I had gotten at the end of the day. Had I not taken time to take charge of my mental health, had I not taken time to discover a hobby I loved to go to gym, I loved creating content on my then blog, which I ended up shutting down, but it also gave me an avenue to be out of my PhD and concentrate on something else. So when you're doing your PhD, make sure you get yourself a hobby. Don't only concentrate about the research that you're doing. Find other things you're interested in and make sure you have that work-life balance. Number 5 is whatever you're experiencing right now in your PhD will end. There's nothing in this life that is permanent. Your PhD candidature will go by, and at the end, you have to make sure you come out as a person who is sane, as a person who still has their head on their shoulders. So, if that's the reason, take care of yourself. Take care of your mental health. Create that work-life balance. Create those boundaries of what you can do and what you cannot do. Your supervisor is not a god that you have to fear them, in the sense that you can't object what they are saying, you can't counter what they are telling you to do. Make sure you create that boundary, and when you create that boundary, it's going to create for you that respect that you deserve. I've seen, it's absurd, but many PhD students are exploited by their supervisors because the supervisor believes you're there at their mercies, and if you let your relationship go like that, at the end of your PhD, you're going to live a miserable life. So create boundaries with your supervisor, and also have a way of reporting back your progress with your supervisor. When you create those boundaries, you set that communication. If it's, I'll be communicating every week to let you know the progress of the project, or I'll be communicating every 2 weeks to let you know the progress of the project, let it be so that you're not pushed in a corner whereby you cannot speak for yourself, so that you're not pushed in a corner where you cannot really take charge of your mental health and your life, because there's life outside a PhD. And when you're done with this, you really understand that, oh yeah, it was just like any other qualification. So if you're starting your PhD journey, these are the 5 lessons I wish I knew at the start of my PhD, and now I'm passing them over to you to make sure that you don't have the same mistakes I had when I was doing my PhD. So if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Here I share basically career guidance and career lessons from my own lessons and the people I coach on their career journeys. If you want one-to-one help to advance your career, I'm your girl. Hit me up. The link is in the description of this episode. If you haven't downloaded my blueprint to career clarity, it's also linked in the description of this episode, and I can't wait for you to use it to help you streamline your career to where you want to go. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day. Catch you in the next episode. Bye. I hope you've learned something from this episode, and if you have, please rate and review wherever you listen to your podcast. Subscribe to this podcast. Share it with your family, friends, and those that you think are interested in career development. Also, follow me on the socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. The username is The Frame Solutions. I can't wait to speak to you in the next episode. Stay blessed. Bye-bye. I loved creating content on my then blog, which I locked